Ladies and gentlemen, one of the most interesting metrics to gauge throughout chess history is who had the highest rating of their generation, who has some of the highest ratings of all time. Now, as you might imagine, you're going to find the all-time greats at the top of that list, Magnus Carlsen being the one who had the highest live rating ever at 2,889.2. Garry Kasparov is second on that list, and in this video, I am going to show you those ratings and the game in which they occurred. I hope you enjoy. Timestamps are on the video player. Let's get into it. Obviously, rating fluctuates as the years go on, and there are periods of time where the players have massive gaps between number one and number two in the world. We are going to begin with Magnus's conquest of achieving 2,889.2. It is April 21st, 2014. The players are in their second round in Shamkir. It's a tournament in Azerbaijan, and it is the Vugar Gashimov Memorial, and Hikaru Nakamura, you might recognize that name, is the opponent. Magnus begins with d4, and we have a Slav defense with e3. Now, normally white can play knight c3 in this position, and it's kind of considered a little bit more common than the move e3, but okay, e3 is obviously very reasonable as well, and that allows black to develop the bishop to f5. We have knight c3, and now Hikaru doesn't close the door kind of for this bishop by playing the move e6, inviting knight h4. Hikaru, as far as I know, plays a pretty big sideline and plays a6. But this is 2014, so Slav defense theory is a little bit, it's a little bit different back then. Magnus now plays something really fascinating. He plays bishop e2, h6, bishop d3. You know, left unnoticed, this looks like a mouse slip, but actually, this is a really hilarious idea. First of all, if Magnus just goes bishop d3, originally, Hikaru's going to play bishop back to g6 and maintain this tension. And bishop takes hg is an advantage for black because black just opens up his rook. Magnus makes a waiting move, and when Hikaru commits his h-pawn, then he plays bishop d3, which makes you wonder, why didn't Hikaru play e6? Again, I think Hikaru is trying to avoid variations where this knight will capture this bishop. So very interesting idea by Magnus, who, even though he wastes a move with the bishop, actually gets kind of a nice position. It's a little bit more spacious for him. Computer thinks it's completely equal, but in pure Magnus style, even 8 years ago when this video is being recorded now, he gets a very playable position. Both sides castle, Magnus plays rook fd1. With 8 pawns on the board, you're constantly looking at where the trades are going to occur and how. Hikaru trades off his dark squared bishop, finishes his development and says, Magnus, you have a slight space advantage. You have bishop for knight, but I'm very happy. I'm chilling. Also, I'm like 2,772 myself, so not so shabby. B3, Magnus just makes a waiting move, brings his rook to the middle, and slides back with his queen. What is Magnus planning? Like, what is actually Magnus's game plan? His queen and both rooks control each a file, C, D, E, but what's going to happen in the middle? What's he going to do? So Hikaru comes forward and also brings his rook. Now, Magnus begins the unwinding process. Drops back with the knight. The point is that he is going to play f3 by kicking the knight out, knight d3 or knight c2, and then he is going to activate this bishop on the long diagonal. Bishops are very powerful pieces, and that bishop needs a support, so knight c2 might be one of the ideas. And notice how nobody's touched the pawns. Nobody wants to give way in the middle of the board. Hikaru anticipates that f3 is coming, but here is the most questionable decision in my opinion. Knight d6 allowing bishop a3. Obviously f3 was coming nonetheless. Maybe he could have played for a5, I don't know. You know, a5, f3, still knight d6 probably required because if you go back this way, white might just very freely expand in the middle of the board. But okay, Hikaru seems unconcerned, right? He just takes some space himself. That bishop on a3 is strong, but there's no real way for Magnus to actually do anything with this diagonal. But he plays bishop b4. And he's just ever so slightly inconveniencing the black pieces. Queen c7, queen f3. And it's clear that the dark squares are a liability. When 6 of your 8 pawns are on a certain color, that color is stronger than the opposite, right? So the light squares are strong, but the dark squares are not so strong. And the dark square bishop for white is looking very nice. So now we have a trade, and Magnus continues expanding on that side of the board. Hikaru builds up a nice little resistance, and Magnus here, very chill, trades the queens. You might think, why is he trading queens? I mean, he might have a slight advantage. The queen is the glue of the black position. And black is now left with these 3 pawns that Magnus will mercilessly build up pressure against. And Hikaru correctly tries to liquidate, right? He plays b5, takes, puts his knight back confidently into the middle of the board, and e5, Hikaru trying to solve all his problems by throwing the pawns forward and trading them off, but Magnus is right there. e4 strikes in the middle as well. Knight back to b6. Magnus has taken a pawn, right? He's taken a pawn. Knight to d8. Rook slides over to g6. Uh-oh. Bishop h6 looking quite nice. The rook is ready to bully the king. And 2 pawns, but Hikaru just in time with a little bit of counterplay to get one of the pawns back. But now all of a sudden we take a deep breath and we see, even though these pawns have stayed on the board, it's Magnus who has the 3-on-2, but more than anything else, he's got all the activity. The bishop is still the killer. The bishop has become the glory piece with permanent pressure on Hikaru's position. And what ultimately ends up happening is Magnus gets a second pawn. And it takes a little bit of time because, obviously, Hikaru's not just going to resign the game because he's down a couple of pawns. He can still create some counterplay. But look at Magnus. I mean, controlling everything. Everything. The black rooks trying to get onto the second rank together, right? They're trying to get over here. Knight c5, he closes the door. A rook trade is beautiful for Magnus. Now he has to worry about a lot less. Hikaru is still creating some counterplay, but it's simply not enough. And move 61, rook g4, defends everything. And Hikaru decided to call it a day. He could have honestly played on a little bit more, decides to call it a day. Magnus gets the win and his highest rating of all time at 2,889. I believe he went on to win this tournament with 6.5 points out of 10. There was a 3-way tie for second place, including Hikaru, with 5 out of 10. And Magnus won it by 1.5 points. But he did lose points afterward. He actually, I think the very next day or 2 days after, lost to Caruana. So that's normally what happens. They get their highest rating ever, then they draw, and then they lose. But this is it. 2,889. This is the closest he has ever come to reaching 2,900. And let's go and see how Garry Kasparov has the second highest rating of all time. Now, we have to go 14 years back. The year is 2000, the year that Kasparov lost the World Championship match, but in many people's eyes was still the best player in the world. This is Linares. So in the year 2000, they didn't publish ratings every month. They published them twice or 3 times a year. That's it. Nowadays, they publish new ratings every month. And the live rating changes throughout the month as they play, but it doesn't update for the month. Your rating stays the same for 30 days. Whatever it is at the end of the month, that's the official rating for the next month. But in between, if you're playing games, your rating does change. Now, this is Linares, the strongest tournament at the time, played in Spain. Best players in the world, including Vishwanathan Anand, 5-time world champion. The second highest rated player in the world, January 2000. Second highest rated player, 2769, Kasparov 2851. And here's their game. Let's look at it from Garry's perspective. It's a Sicilian defense, and as always, it is Kasparov going for the Najdorf Sicilian, one of the most imbalanced, complicated openings in all of chess. Bishop e2, not the most aggressive line, kicks the knight out of the middle and plays bishop e7. We are also going to be seeing bishop e6 very soon, as the Najdorf is ultimately all about that d5 square. Anand decides to attack with f4. Kasparov plays queen c7, and Anand plays an interesting move, a move that I've never seen really much of nowadays, and that move is knight d5. Settling on that square, forcing a trade out of black, and knight d7 looks to defend the middle. White has to choose between taking and pushing or just leaving the pawn there. Taking isn't so good because you just give a lot of activity to black. D takes e5 is also reasonable. Pushing also doesn't make any sense. In fact, it's far worse than taking because you keep your rook shut and the bishop doesn't get any activity. So you've done nothing successful for yourself, right? You bought a nice house and you built it and there were no windows. Not very smart. So castles king h1, and you'll notice that the tension is staying here. Kasparov decides to relieve it because that opens up some active lines for his own pieces. He plays bishop back to f8 to open up his rook. That looks really nice and juicy. He also have long-term perspective of g6, bishop g7, and rerouting over here. We're going to see that in a moment. There's the move g6. Very complicated game. You let Stockfish think, it thinks it's 0-0-0, which basically means, I don't know, you guys play, you figure it out. I got no clue. So g6, right? Bishop to f3, and Kasparov plays rook c8, bringing his other rook into the action. Knight back to c1, and now one step back, one sign of weakness, and Garry Kasparov smells blood. He's like, knight c1? What are you trying to do? Reroute. Magnus can reroute. Remember last game, Magnus went back to e1 and then out to d3. Magnus can reroute because it's a slow position. You're going back in the middle of a war? Knight e5. All right, go ahead and take me. Go ahead and take me. Rook takes is good. I even like d takes and just marching forward, right? b3. b3 stabilizes the queen side. h5, attacking with the pawns that are supposed to be defending his king and winning control of the g4 square. Anand doesn't like that very much. Another forward move by Kasparov. Bishop g7, ever so slightly improving his position. 3 forward moves. Knight to e2, another forward move. Taking on f3, getting rid of one of the bishops, inching forward. 5 moves. Rook c1, b5, 6 moves now. All right, 6 moves in a row. We're targeting this. What happened to the position over here? I mean, everything is falling apart. Queen d2, taking forward, 7 forward moves. h4, 8 forward moves. Knight h5. I mean, do you understand? 9 moves he's made going forward. Forward, forward, forward. Foot on the gas. 9 moves. Now, this move still counts as going forward, but it's a side shuffle. The rook doesn't stare into the back of the queen. Jeez, rook. What are you doing? So inappropriate. Rook on b8. Goes down to b2. Still, in my eyes, an initiative-gaining move. Knight g1, the rook bulldozes in. Rook c2, and now a beautiful tactic. Look at this. Queen takes on c4. If you take my queen, I take yours, and I've got the second back. I got the second. Look at this. The queen hits everybody. Everybody. If you take on b2, I could even go this way if I wanted to, but I'm not going to do that. I'm going to take the rook, and then I'm going to obviously attack. I mean, queen c4... Anand resigns. He's down a pawn and the position is falling apart. All his pieces have been reduced to absolutely nothing. Anand is one of the strongest players ever. And Kasparov just said, I'm done. This game is ending now. 1 move backwards. And the attack just did not stop. It just didn't stop. He literally never took his foot off the gas. The one move that he played, that is the side shuffle, was basically the knockout punch. And it just drove the rook into... And this is how Kasparov, winning his second game of the Linares tournament, he ended up tying for first with Vladimir Kramnik, who took the world championship from him that year, got the rating of 2,856.7. Now, we actually go forward again to the year 2014. That was a big year for gaining your highest ratings ever. Fabiano Caruana, that man challenged for the world championship in the year 2016. Caruana was 2,851.3. He touched Kasparov's highest rating ever on the official list. On the official list, Kasparov's highest rating was 2,851. Unofficially, his highest rating was 2,856. If you're confused about the rating system in chess, I don't blame you. Chess has never made it easy for the general public to understand anything. Anything at all. All right, ever. And it's to this day, which is why we have this channel. Hopefully I can break it down for you. 2851, how did this happen? These players are playing the Grand Prix in Baku, Azerbaijan, same country as the Shamkir Challenge, Magnus, 2014. But now we're later in the year. It's October 8th, 2014. It's the 6th round. Caruana is playing a very strong player from Russia, Peter Svidler. And the game begins with Svidler going for his favorite Grunfeld defense. So Fabiano plays an antidote. He plays f3. f3 is not something that Grunfeld players like to see because it forces them to either play a silly-looking Grunfeld or a King's Indian defense. And Svidler doesn't play the King's Indian defense, right? Normally, the entire purpose is to have a knight ready to chop on c3, okay? But when you play it like this, there is no knight to chop. White just gets a built-up center. But this is fine. This is fine, okay? Everything is okay. Caruana, right, confident playing this position with both colors. He actually plays this with white and with black. Now, you could see White's point. White gets a very big center. Queen d2, bishop e3 looking this way. And if you had to take a 50-50 shot at where you think White is going to castle, where do you think White is going to castle? This way. And boom, boom, boom. Now, there are many lines here. Nowadays, people are playing knight c6 in this position. And after long castles, they are playing e5. So they are attacking the center right away and then shoving their knight in White's face. But back then, Svidler played queen d6. Okay, that's also a reasonable move, but it's very provocative because White slides the king out of kind of the danger of the c-file, cuddles behind the pawns, and is ready with h4, h5. Now, rook d8 here is played all the time. I mean, just simply all the time. But Svidler, at the time, wanted to play a new idea, so he played the move a6. a6 is preventing the move, knight to b5 and bishop to b5, but usually knight b5, right? And black will move the knights out of the way, and boom, boom, the pawns will come forward. Knight a5, knight c4, etc. Fabiano here says, I don't know what this is, but I'm going to go attack you on 2 squares. So he plays h4. Now we have rook d8 attacking the middle, d5 shoving the pawn forward, winning at connect 4, and forcing the knight to move into the middle. And queen f2, waiting to crawl forward, getting the queen off the middle, and looking at that c5 square. That c5 square is looking really nice to make that queen feel uncomfortable. There is a car alarm going off. That's terribly annoying. Somebody trying to break into a car outside? I really hope the owner turns that off. Okay, it stopped. I was ready to like cut this video, but it was only like 2 seconds. And the mic only picks it up when I talk because it has a noise gate. Yeah. Anyway, we had a 2-second interlude there. Anyway, so white is ready with h5, bishop c5, etc. Svidler plays h5, and it seems like the problems are solved. I mean, white isn't going to play g4, obviously, because you just take, right? So bishop c5, queen f6, and we're still harassing the queen. Now, we're obviously not going to repeat moves. Caruana plays g4. Now, folks, if you build up a defense in your position that prevents your opponent from playing a move, and then they play the move anyway, one of two things is possible. You're the idiot, or they're the idiot. We're about to find out. That's the beauty of the game. Pawn takes g4. Fabiano shoves the f-pawn forward. Oh, that was his idea. He wants to remove the knight from the middle of the board, and when it moves, he is going to continue the attack. Now, Fabiano here has an incredible choice. He can take on g7 and play h5. That looks incredible. He can take on g7, not play h5, and slowly build up his attack. He can play e5, which looks unbelievably tempting. He can also play knight e2 and then h5 and not take. And apparently knight e2 is the best move because Caruana gets a little impatient, plays e5. It looks so good. But that allows Svidler to sack the knight. And now, for the cost of 3 pawns, right? 3 pawns, one guy has a piece. All right? Caruana has one apiece. He's up a knight, but for 3 pawns. And where's his attack? Okay, he wants to play h5, I understand. But black is quick. He gives a check. And now he's building up that center of the board. And I'm not so sure that h5 is going to work. But you can bet your life that, well, don't do that. But you can, that if h5 gets through at some point and black is not ready, the game is over. The game is just simply over. So, knight c4, h5, there it is. Now, everything is going to, the entire, safety of the black position will be determined. He plays queen b6. This is exactly what a player who wants to get away from an attack wants to do. If you trade queens here, then after this, there's nothing. There is no attack. You can take on g6. Where's your attack? You have 1 rook? The rook needs the queen. The rook is a baby. He's the backup in a group of people trying to go to a fight. The queen is the boss, all right? Instigating, fighting, talks the talk, walks the walk. Rook won't get in a fight unless the queen's there. So, queen b6, no queen trade. Knight goes into e3. Rook has to avoid. Now king g7, and it's actually Svidler who is looking like he's going to fight back on the h-file, right? So he does. But unfortunately, it's all for naught, because rook d3, and this knight is a little bit stuck. That knight gets kicked out, goes back, and now he takes on f5, and all of a sudden, uh-oh. And it's not just that. If you take with the knight, I could also take g4, right? So that's what I'm going to do. And now if we count the material, one of your pawns for the piece has fallen, and the more pieces that fall off the board, the more value your piece has. So knight for 3 pawns is 3 equals 3, but 3 is not always equal to 3 in chess, especially if there's not a lot of other pieces on the board. Pieces get stronger with the more unity of other pieces they have. Knight takes e4, and once Fabiano consolidates everything, rook g1 is coming, knight f4 is coming, and he has 2 of these and his opponent has 1. Peter Svidler calls it a day. He resigns, and Fabiano Caruana, back then still representing the country of Italy as he did for many years, gets the rating of 2,851.3. Very, very interesting here. I mean, incredible stuff. Beautiful game by Caruana, refuting this new idea by Svidler. You know, I gotta tell you, back then that a6 move was a new idea by Svidler. It never caught on. There's, to this day, maybe 10 games played. That's how chess goes sometimes. Sometimes you try a new idea, everybody plays it. Sometimes you get pancaked, nobody plays it. 4th highest rating of all time belongs to Levon Aronian, still representing the country of Armenia in the year 2014, February. So we go back to 2014. 2014 was the year that it was Magnus and everybody else battling for number 2 and 3. And you're reading that right. His opponent is actually Hikaru Nakamura. This was played in the Zurich Challenge, if I'm not mistaken, in Switzerland in February 2014. It was a 6-player tournament, yeah, Levon beat Hikaru to get 2835.5. He was dominant. He was world number 2 powerhouse back then. And this was the game. So we have a King's Indian defense, right? So knight f3, c4, g6, and like this. So both sides castle, and yeah, I mean the position is you know, it's very theoretical. The second that white plays the move d4, white is going to be going back to just a standard King's Indian defense. There you go. And black plays the move a6. I think Hikaru's rating at this time is like 2790, by the way. It's like 2790. So even he has gained a ton of points that year. Everybody was gaining. Everybody was in good shape. So rook b8, and black is ready to play b7, b5, right? There it is. So something's going to happen here. All right, something's going to happen. Levon attacks the knight in the middle. Hikaru says, no way. You want a knight? I'm going to get a knight by myself. Knight drops back. This knight has to go somewhere. It goes out to a5. And actually, this looks really nice. Very complicated position here in the King's Indian defense, as both these knights are attacking the pawns in the middle. This defends. This attempts to fight back on the c-file. We have a trade. Levon takes like this because it's important to win the battle for these squares. If you take with the c-pawn, also okay, but maybe Hikaru plays e5. Maybe he attacks on the c-file, which is now open. So for that reason, we have this. But we still have an unbelievably complicated position. Levon takes en passant, and here something really funny happens. You would think black wants the opening of the queen side, right? Bishop faces that way. The rook is very powerful on the b file. a3. a3 is hilarious that this works, because if pawn takes, which is what happens, you would think you're going to take back, hold everything together, but why would you open up this? That's not the point. Levon goes bishop d2, and the threat is to take, and play knight c6, and it's not easy to stop. It's not easy to stop. Levon finds a very nice idea, almost completely counterintuitive to the position, and while Hikaru can still kick around the white pieces, they're going straight forward. Knight c6. Black has an option. Play the world's ugliest retreat or sacrifice the rook. Kind of hard to sack a rook. I mean, I'm not going to lie. For a knight, so he moves it out of the way, but here the knight drops back, and we're gonna lose this pawn. Hikaru tries to save it. Now another very nice idea. Queen a2. Look at this. The forces are ready to line up. Knight goes to c6, right? Bishop f5. Check. And that pawn is still looking real weak. b4. Continuing to punish the queen side for the cost of his own pawn, by the way. Rook b1. I mean, Levon, if it's not clear, is playing on one side of the board. Every one of his pieces faces that way, right? Rook b2. Takes, bishop c6, Hikaru trying to defend. The knight is now also going that way. The bishop is going... Folks, have you ever seen a set of chess pieces just so focused on one side of the board? I love these games when these players are at the top of their, categories. a6, rook b7. Look at this move, sacrificing the rook. You can take it, and white will continue to bulldoze. Knight takes e4. Dust is settling. Levon is now up a pawn with the passed a pawn. He takes the knight, takes rook back to b3, and even though Hikaru is able to win the pawn on d5, the game is over because rook takes g7, and there is just too much. At the end of it, it's not just the pawn freezing the rook in the corner. It's the check, the queen comes to e3, the king is hunted out, and it's a mating net. And Levon wins one move before mate, couple moves actually, queen g4. Hunts the king into the middle of the board, combining play on one side of the board with the other side of the board. 28-35.5, a very nice victory, and I think he won the Zurich Challenge. Most of these players ended up winning these tournaments. It's very hard not to win tournaments when you're at the top of your literally career ever, but maybe he didn't, because any tournament that Magnus Carlsen plays in, yeah, that's a thing. So one funny nugget of information as I was doing research. Veselin Topalov, who was a world champion contender and a world champion himself, has the 5th highest rating of all time at 2826.5. The craziest thing is, he achieved that by also beating Hikaru. I'm not kidding. When I was doing my research, his second round, Sinkfield Cup 2015 in St. Louis, he defeated Hikaru in like a 70 or 80 move endgame to get that rating. But the round before that, he beat Magnus. Magnus is world champ, and he beat Magnus with a move no one's ever played before. and it was like an insane game. So I figured I would show this game. It was a lot more interesting than the other game, but that is insane. Three of the 5 games in this video, Hikaru played people who were at the absolute top, and they were in the peak of their careers, and they just so happened that it was against Hikaru, like in the middle of a tournament or something. Insane. I mean, poor guy. Jeez. It's like when, I don't know. It's like tragic. I mean, you're trying to go up, and everybody's like 28-4. Like, what are you going to do? So this game was totally chaotic. This is the first round of the Singfield Cup 2015, and we have a Sicilian defense. Bishop b5 is an interesting variation where white delays the move d4, so white doesn't play a traditional open Sicilian. Knight f6, rook e1, and we have this. Very weird position. Very weird. Don't play like this. Don't ever try this at home. Point is that white wants to play c3. So let me just show you. c3, bishop c2, and then play d4. So just a very non-traditional Sicilian. Just wait a bit of a long time. Maybe turn the game into sort of like a Ruy Lopez or something. But okay, b5. b5 is obviously trying to play c4. So white plays c4 himself. Now, up until this moment, I think there had been a handful of games following rook b8, b4, a lot of natural looking moves, even as crazy as this looks, right? Takes, and the bishop on d3 is under fire. Topalov here in 2015 played a move no one had ever played before. He played a move that had never been seen. He uncorked the novelty against the world champ. g5. Oh yes. Pawn to g5. What? Huh? Hello? Excuse me? Well, here's the point. If you don't take it, I'm going to go g4. But the thing is, there are head-spinning complications whether or not you take that pawn. Okay? You could play e5. You could bring the bishop out of the way and allow g4. Try to outmaneuver them. I mean, it's just totally insane lines. Magnus decides, I'm going to take, slide my bishop back, and you can take the pawn on c4, but I'm going to play knight a3 and try to win it back. But hello, this is the entire purpose of sacrificing the g-pawn, right? Target g8, target the knight, target the pawn. That is the entire purpose. Magnus not scared. He's like, this looks dumb. Your idea looks stupid. I don't care that you have engine analysis. It's 2015. Computers are not even that strong. Takes, and now Magnus doesn't even, look at this. He gives up a knight. He doesn't even win it back. He plays d4. What? He doesn't even take the knight back. What? Because this is still hanging. But if you move it, the bulldozing continues. And Magnus goes bishop h5. Now, if you count the material, black's up a piece. Magnus seems to think that doesn't matter because he is Magnus. It just doesn't matter. I mean, it just doesn't matter. Like, normal principles don't apply. He's playing knight takes h7. He's going to take on f8. Again, like, for example, he's going to take on f8. He's got bishop h6. He actually has even worse. It's even worse. Like, Magnus's attack is ready. It's right there. He's going to refute this entire thing, make Topalov look silly for even trying it. What is this position? This does not look... If you gave me this position and said, what are the players, white and black? I would say, like, I don't know, 1,100. This just looks ridiculous. This is two guys, average rating 28-30. Huh? Queen d7, takes, e5, queen c6. We're threatening a mate. f3, queen g6. That was the key idea. Magnus here had to be precise, I think, for one more move and take the bishop. That was what he had to do. And then queen h3 followed. You can't take because of the pin. Something like this, g3. And you can't take the knight, but apparently the game just goes on. Like, you just leave this knight here. This is what Stockfish wants. Just leave the knight trapped in a cage, and you laugh at it. But you don't take it because then this would have been possible. So you go rook c6, and then you win it back. Not very human-like, so that doesn't happen. And instead, Topalov gets a queen trade and still has an extra piece. He just has an extra piece. He wins the battle of the complications versus Magnus. Now, Magnus, he's got 6 pawns versus 4, and he still is, I mean, at the end of the day, he's still Magnus Carlsen. So he's more than capable of creating counterplay. He does have a good position. Problem is, white has the type of position where even though he's 1 point down, that's it, 2 pawns for a piece. Remember the Svidler game? The more pieces that get traded, the better it is for the guy with the extra piece. So Topalov is, not only he has that advantage of trading the pieces, which is why Magnus has to play passively, Topalov is staring at the king. So Magnus can't move anything forward. Anything he moves forward creates a weakness. The pieces don't all get to go together, they get to go one at a time. So Topalov does a good job slowly infiltrating. Look at his bishops. Look at this, inching forward, right? Okay, he doesn't repeat moves. Very nice tactical shot. If bishop takes e5, there's bishop f3 with the pin and hits both rooks. And now he trades bishops, moves his king out of the way of the knight fork. And I told you, the more pieces that get traded, the more powerful the person with the bishop has of position. And on move 40, Magnus Carlsen resigned, understanding that there is nothing left to be done. Everything is defended. Topalov will slowly trade off a rook and win a very long and brutal endgame. And with this win, Topalov claimed the fifth highest, I should say, rating of all time. Only 0.3 points, by the way, higher than Mamedyarov, but 5 highest ratings of all time sounds better than 6. But yes, Shahriar Mamedyarov has a 2826, and it's very close. Anand 2820, Wesley. So I got all these ratings, by the way, from 2700 Chess. Folks, I hope you enjoyed this video. I was inspired because I don't think I ever saw a video like this, and I really like to brainstorm unique content here on YouTube. If you made it 30 minutes in with me, thank you. Appreciate your support as always. Any other videos you want to see in the future that I haven't made that are kind of like this one, something unique about the chess world, let me know. I'll see you in the next video. Get out of here.